Our Around the World segment tonight, President Trump visited Saudi Arabia over the weekend. And while everyone was talking about that weird picture with the glowing orb, something far more serious happened. Trump finalized the sale of $110 billion worth of weapons to the country that during the campaign he accused of being behind 9/11. Watch.
Yesterday we signed historic agreements with the kingdom that will invest almost $400 billion in our two countries and create many hundreds of thousands of jobs in America and Saudi Arabia. This landmark agreement includes the announcement of a $110 billion Saudi-funded defense purchase, and we will be sure to help our Saudi friends to get a good deal from our great American defense companies, the greatest anywhere in the world. This agreement will help the Saudi military to take a far greater role in security and operations having to do with security.
With me now from the Washington Free Beacon, Adam Kredo. Adam, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, Adam, let's start with Saudi Arabia here. First of all, didn't the majority of the hijackers from September 11th, 2001, where 3,000 of our countrymen were killed, didn't the majority of those hijackers come from Saudi Arabia?
Yes, that is absolutely true. The majority of them did, in fact, come from Saudi Arabia.
Then, Adam, clear this up for me. I don't understand this. If the majority of the hijackers, the 9/11 hijackers, came from Saudi Arabia, if women are still forced to wear veils over their face and cover their bodies at the risk of punishment from the government, even when American women like Melania or Ivanka Trump, Michelle Obama, Hillary Clinton, when high-profile American women go there and don't wear a veil, it's a large enough deal that it creates a national news story. There are also reports that the Saudi elite are the ones that fund terrorism, that they may have even been behind funding the 9/11 attack. Why do we give over $100 billion to that nation?
Well, look, I think there's a very simple answer to that, and they happen to be a major U.S. ally. Now, look, there's never been definitive proof that the Saudi government actually funded 9/11, but yes, you're right, there is a level of concern given the nature of radicalism and extremism there. They do have that in their country, though I think it's disputed whether that's actually government funded and supported. And I think it's also important not to forget who actually did carry out the 9/11 attacks. That was Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden, not Saudi Arabia. Now, look, we have
No, I understand. Let me interrupt just for a moment. I understand that. I understand that it wasn't the government, but the elite in Saudi Arabia, they're the ones who are the shadow government. They control the government. And it was the elite, the rich people in Saudi Arabia, that there were reports had ties. These reports said that these elite had ties to funding the 9/11 hijackers. I mean, in Saudi Arabia, I mean, they're the primary exporter of Wahhabism, Islam. That's a very extreme version of Islam. How do we ensure that our money, that our arms are not being used against us or our allies?
Well, look, I think it's a completely legitimate question. It's one that the U.S. Congress is definitely going to have to contemplate as they move forward on funding deals of this nature. But I think the announcement of the deal represents one very major thing, and we can, I think, nitpick at the choice of location and the choice of country that Trump chose to deliver that major speech on Islam. But Saudi Arabia, for the past 8 years, has really been in a troubled place, and that's because of the power vacuum created by the Obama administration. Trump's approach is wildly different. That is to empower allies like Saudi Arabia, and for better or worse, they are an ally, and the president's chief goal is to conduct diplomacy for the United States of America, and that's what Trump is doing, reasserting America in the region. I think we learned very well that 8 years of a power vacuum didn't work out great for the region, particularly our allies like Israel and Saudi Arabia, and a large portion of this is going to fund efforts to counter the Iranian threat in the region, which truly is a global maniacal threat, much more than the Saudi government, which we have seen as actually open to speaking with the Israelis, open to speaking with the U.S. and supporting our goals there. And I think Trump said it best, certainly better than I could have, and almost surprisingly to admit that. But he said that, look, the U.S. can't be alone in the fight against terror. Right. We can't be that world police. We need allies in the region. And I think the Saudis, especially over the last 8 years, the winds have changed quite a bit in that region, and the Saudis do see that it's in their best interest to fight that terror threat and grow closer with Israel and countries of that nature, and I think it's in our best interest to foster that.
Right, it certainly is a change of strategy, like you said, from the past, not even the past 8 years, but even years before that. It's a change of strategy for the President of the United States not to call out the human rights abuses inflicted on the people of these countries by their government, but to say, hey, let's find our common interest and let's fight terrorism. Let's get terrorism out of here. Adam, I want to go back to what you said about Iran, and this is actually President Trump talking about our need to confront the terror threat funded by Iran. Take a look.
From Lebanon to Iraq to Yemen, Iran funds arms and trains terrorists, militias, and other extremist groups that spread destruction and chaos across the region. For decades, Iran has fueled the fires of sectarian conflict and terror. Until the Iranian regime is willing to be a partner for peace, all nations of conscience must work together to isolate Iran, deny it. Funding for terrorism cannot do it.
Listen, Adam, I thought this was great on President Trump's part. I was one of the ones who really appreciated candidate Trump's rhetoric on policing the Iran deal very, very closely. Like he said, that even the slightest breath of a violation, he would pull out of the Iran nuke deal, which he hasn't done. But this, I guess my question is, how does he balance what he said in this video, isolating Iran, holding them accountable for funding terrorism and for their nuke program? How does he balance that with not pulling us out of the Iran nuke deal?
Well, look, I think there's a careful consideration taking place that you can't willy-nilly pull out of the deal. I've certainly advocated since Trump came into office and when he was campaigning that you don't rip it up on day one. I think that's not very smart policy personally, as opposed to as I am to certain elements of the Iran deal itself that I think are bad. But look, as much as we can nitpick at the speech, I think it did one thing very successfully and well, and that is say that I'm not going to go to your country, wherever it is, in this case Saudi Arabia, and spit at your feet and call you out for human rights abuses. They certainly exist, but that's just bad negotiating on its face. It's the same reason we've seen the approach to China that Trump has taken, and also the approach to places like Israel, quite frankly. For 8 years under the Obama administration, it wasn't clear that Jerusalem was a part of Israel, that the U.S. and Israeli alliance was solid, and it's the same thing for the Saudis. So I think we're getting to these places slowly, and I would say too slowly for my taste, but we are going to get to a place where the Trump administration can confront Iran. Just these sanctions on Iran's ballistic missile system that we saw last week, that's a major step forward, and that's the complete opposite of what the Obama administration was doing. And once this review of the deal is ended, I think we're going to find the White House concluding that the deal needs to either be renegotiated or Iran needs to be booted from it for its repeated violations.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, just the fact President Trump calling out terrorism and nations that sponsor and fund and give money to terrorists, that's a striking departure from the last 8 years. I mean, President Obama sent billions of dollars to the same nation that President Trump is now saying we need to isolate because they fund terrorism. Adam, thanks for coming on the show. Great to talk to you.